Welcome to week 6 of our summer course of medical records and the law. And today we are going to talk about some laws that may have more benefit to you personally than they might professionally. But the fact is that depending upon where you work, you might get promoted into a management position, in which case you are being asked to hire. In those cases, you will be needing this knowledge. So let's take a look at some healthcare laws for human resources. Workplace legalities. We start with the doctrine of corporate negligence. And this is a federal law that states that hospitals can be held liable for the competence of their staff. It is similar to a doctrine of respondus superior, which means the supervisor is the one who is liable. And I want you to remember this. It does not exclude the liability of the staff member. It includes the supervisor. So if you are found guilty of fraud, for example, not only will you be fined and penalized and possibly go to jail or prison, but your supervisor or your department head may go with you. Okay, Equal Employment Opportunity Act means that federal law does not permit hiring or firing individuals based solely on their race, on their gender, or their age. So in other words, they cannot refuse to hire or fire someone because they're coming close to retirement age and they don't want to pay a pension. Or, of course, we have all seen far too many examples of corporations who hire or make their hiring decisions or firing decisions based on somebody's race or gender. The point of this is that corporations need to focus on the competence of the individual and not anything else, not any of this. Okay, it's what we all want. It's what needs to be. Now, this law has been in existence for a long time, but the fact is that if you as an employee don't know about it and you got fired because of your gender, for example, or did not get promoted or did not get hired because of your gender, you have a right to make a complaint to the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And they take these complaints very seriously. I can tell you that for certain. Okay, OSHA, very, very important. The Occupational Safety and Health Act is a federal law that requires employers to develop and implement whatever necessary to ensure a safe and healthy place of employment for all staff. And the best possible example of fulfilling this law you have seen in our healthcare facilities of all sizes during COVID. That's what all the PPE, personal protection equipment, is all about. And that is why, if you can remember back over a year ago when everything with COVID first started, you may remember there was a PPE shortage. And so therefore, families were not permitted to visit. And it was very difficult for even healthcare professionals to care for patients because you don't want the gown or the gloves to transmit the virus from one patient to another. That would kind of defeat the purpose. So this is very important, and you have gotten to see a real live explanation of this. Other things that OSHA has demanded of healthcare facilities are sharps boxes. If you look, you know, those plastic boxes with the little lever on the top, where after they give an injection, they put the syringe into the box. And this was very important, as you may not remember or even know, that before this was enacted, they would just throw syringes out in the garbage. And then what would happen is the environmental services people would come and collect up the garbage bag, and the needle might poke through and poke the employee and transmit disease. And yes, there are people who got not only sick, but have died from that, which is why they created sharps boxes. Now all of the needles go into this box, which is sealed, and then it's taken away by hazmat people who dispose of it, and you just get a new empty box, and there's no concern for anyone being harmed. And that's another good example of one of the many things that are required of healthcare facilities to make sure that you have a safe workplace. Okay. Americans with Disabilities Act is a federal law, and right, could you imagine we actually needed a federal law that says you can't just not hire someone because they're in a wheelchair or they use a cane. I mean, it makes no sense. Why would you want to miss out on qualified individuals just because they're in a wheelchair? Okay, but this is very important. This is only applicable if the disability does not impede the individual from actually doing the job properly. So for example, as coders, you know that getting the code, all the letters and the numbers in the correct order, is critical to you doing your job correctly, which means that someone who has dyslexia would be a disability that could legally interfere with someone getting a job as a medical coder, because the disability would actually get in the way of this individual doing their job properly. Okay. All right, wage and hour. Wage and hour are regulations that all have to do with how much money is paid and how that amount is calculated. So wage and hour particularly will refer to how much per hour are you getting and which hours count. And you may say, well, all the hours I work should count, but they don't. Okay. If you are given an hour or half an hour off for lunch, you don't get paid for that. If your facility has a rule, no overtime can be worked, then if you work overtime, you may not get paid for that. Now, remember that there are differences between those who are hired on an hourly basis. We're going to pay you $25 an hour versus someone who is hired full-time that is going to get a salary, because a salary will change the calculation of hours and make it broader as to how many hours you may have to work before overtime might kick in, if that's appropriate. Okay. The FMLA, Family and Medical Leave Act, is a federal law that directs companies to provide unpaid leave to employees with a personal or family healthcare crisis. So personal, you just gave birth, you get maternity leave. They don't have to pay you, but they do have to guarantee you your job back, or a job of equal standing back when you return. Okay, this works for fathers also, as well as adoptions. Also, if you have elderly parents that fall into a healthcare crisis, you could get time off from work. The point is to give you, I believe it's up to 6 weeks, but to give you the time to deal with the crisis, and then come back to work without worrying about forfeiting your job or your level. Okay. And again, you're not guaranteed your specific job back, but a job of equal stature and, of course, equal pay. All right. So I put this in the announcements board, more information on human resources laws. There are different states and federal laws, and this is important for yourself to check up on. You need to know your rights, because if you don't know your rights, you can't make sure that your rights are honored and respected. And this is something we always want to make certain. You know, we live in a great country, and certainly our country has its problems. What country doesn't? Okay. What group of more than 2 people doesn't? But the fact of the matter is that when you know the law, when you can stand up, when you are educated in what you're owed, what is due to you, then that way you can prevent somebody from breaking the law or abusing the law. Sometimes.